It might be obvious because I'm a formal education guy. I was always like in the books, learning what I can do, trying to educate myself. Like I was very gung ho on that. And there's two things that I missed that I didn't learn until like my 40s. One is don't be afraid to join mastermind groups and networking. Like to me, that's key. Caleb and I are in a mastermind group together, and it's really, really helpful. I wish I would have started doing that a lot sooner. And the second thing would be finding a mentor sooner. Again, I didn't do that till I was in my 40s. And I hear about a lot of people being able to compress timeframes when they do those things. And I've experienced it myself, later in life. But man, if I would have started that in my 20s, that would be a game changer.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Own the Exit. I'm Caleb, your co-host here in the studio with Aaron. What's up, Aaron?
What's going on? I'm excited for another episode of Own the Exit.
Yeah, come on. I'm actually really excited about the guest that we have today. A guy who is truly like a testament of entrepreneurial drive and spirit and accomplishment. Chad Zdenek, I met him probably a year ago through a mastermind that we're both a part of, and I've just been impressed by his story, his background. You know, he's a licensed general contractor. He's a professional engineer, former CEO of Mobile Illumination, and he has 3 master's degrees. He started out in construction management in the 90s. And then he went on to work as a rocket scientist for Boeing Rocketdyne, working on the space shuttle main engines. Then he became the CEO of Mobile Illumination and grew that company by like 2,000%. And then kind of stepped into the private equity backed by real estate space. And so there's kind of a common thread there too, and has built an impressive portfolio of about 150 million in apartment assets and self-storage assets. And so it's really a pleasure to talk to people of this kind of caliber. And so just want to welcome to the show, Chad Zdenek. Chad, what's up, man?
Cool. Yeah, great to talk with you guys. I know it's been a little while for us to get this on the calendar, but thanks for being persistent and really excited to talk with you guys. I love entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Thanks for joining us, man. This is really exciting. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, just kind of with what you said, so our listeners know, like I've been pursuing Chad to try to get him on the show for quite a while. I just feel like he's such a valuable guest to our Own the Exit community. And so I'm really excited for this conversation. So I know I introduced you a little bit, but obviously, would love for you to fill in the gap, share a little of your backstory, Chad, just so our guests can, or our listeners can kind of get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, so it has been a varied past, as you kind of heard there. I kind of look at it in terms of like 3 different chapters, and each chapter had its strengths and weaknesses, if you will, pros and cons. But the first was, being a rocket scientist for Rocketdyne. It was a Boeing division. We designed and built the space shuttle main engines. I did that for 7 years. And that was like what I refer to as like my Cubicle Jockey days, right? So literally like a, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. type of thing, 5 days a week, very rigid work schedule, not a lot of flexibility there, but I got to do really cool stuff, got to travel to different NASA space flight centers, interact with some really, really smart people. And I was only 21 years old when I was hired in there. So I was the youngest guy in that division, but it was great. And so I did that. But I've always been an entrepreneur. We'll probably get into it a little bit, but I've founded or helped found 8 different companies now. So, so I've always had that itch. And so my brother had started a lighting business, and I was getting my MBA at the time at UCLA and wanted to use that as like my pet project, right? Because I was focusing on entrepreneurship. And it was a really small company, really small, just him and a couple workers. But it was fun for me to kind of work on from a consulting standpoint on helping to devise some systems and processes on how to scale that. And eventually I moved over after I graduated UCLA and went over and worked with him full time. And basically worked there for like 17 years, scaled that business. So it started off with about 4 people. And then when I left, we had about 75 employees, 3 different warehouse locations. We were the biggest company in LA doing that type of work. So it was a cool journey. So that was like my second journey, which is entrepreneurship and owning my own business. But I found that I could have flexibility. Like I didn't have to work, 7 to 4 type of schedule. But I learned, and you guys probably heard this phrase, but like, why work 40 hours for someone else when you can work 80 for yourself?
Yeah.
Like I really learned, like, okay, working 80 for myself, and I could take off a day here, but like I was always working, and so that would kind of had some pros and cons to it as well. And I'd always wanted to get back into real estate. I was in it a bit with construction management, not on the investment side, but certainly in real estate with construction. And I had met a lot of people that had become very wealthy through real estate. And so I really had always wanted to. It probably took me like about 10 years before I finally took the plunge. So my brother bought me out of the company. And I said, you know what, I'm doing real estate full time. This was back in 2018. And so my goal, and I'm still kind of working there. I'm not there yet, but the goal was really living from passive income, right? That's like the holy grail, to be like a limited partner, limited investor, and really live off of that passive income, which to me would provide the most amount of freedom. I'm sure we'll get into freedom in a little bit here. But so the third chapter, if you will, which is still ongoing. I haven't finished that chapter yet. It's really a journey. I haven't gotten to the destination yet, but the idea is really to create a lifestyle supported by passive income where I'm working because I want to work. I love working. I really do. I don't like working 80 hours a week, but I do like working, but I want to work because I want to work. I don't want to work because I have to work, and passive income in real estate is key to that journey.
Mm. That's so awesome, man. No, I love you said it a couple times, just the journey, and I think that's
Yeah.
really, really amazing. Just that mindset too of like, because it's so easy to be like, oh, I'm trying to get to this goal or that or achieve, but it's like, we're just going to be like, I was literally texting with one of our development managers this morning, and he's 65 years old, and he's like, I'm learning every day, and he's built, 40,000 Class A apartment units and been doing this
Hmm.
since he was in his 20s, and he's like, I'm learning every day. And it
Yeah.
was just cool how he's like, he's not trying to retire anytime soon. Like he's going to keep doing this and keep being on that journey of like growing and development. But I'd love to hear a little bit about how you had that 7-year period where you were kind of in that role, like the 7 to 4. I guess what skills or what, I guess mindset, or what did you kind of gain there that then kind of launched you into because you said you were always kind of wired as an entrepreneur. So I know so many entrepreneurs have had, W-2 jobs or different things that have kind of formed different things or have kind of helped them like propel them to, launching these 8 businesses, right? That you launched. So I love to kind of see the continuity there of how that kind of helped you or kind of led you to launching these businesses.
Sure. So, and this will be an interesting factoid for people, especially our Gen Zers listening.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, like work for me started at 7 a.m. and we had a meeting at 7:15 a.m. every day. So like you had to be in the office, and, you could maybe have a 10-minute buffer, right? But like you had to be there. And at 7:15, like everyone's in the meeting, in the room, and just a bunch of different departments getting together to talk about what's going to happen that day and what happened before. And I mean, they were productive meetings. It wasn't a waste of time. It's just when you're working at that caliber, that level of technical engines, like there's a lot of coordination that needs to happen, and it needs to happen daily. So yeah, this whole work from home thing, like that was nowhere to be
Yeah.
found. Flexible work hours, that was not there. You had to be there. So, but one of the things I learned, and this has probably helped a lot, because I did start some businesses before that. So like when I talk about 8 businesses, they're not like all amazing businesses, right? Like one of the businesses was I sold college branded gear to my dorm room, right? So I worked at the swap
Mhm.
meet, and I'd get hats engraved, shirts engraved, and that was my business, right? I mean, it was just making some college money. So
Yeah,
they're not
totally.
all like big things. I just want to kind of set expectations here. I am
Yeah.
a normal guy, like most of us, right? I like to work hard, and I love entrepreneurship. But one of the things I did learn there was the power of systems and processes, which is critical for anybody who's trying to scale a business. like you need to have the systems in place in order to do that, right? You've got turnover you've got to deal with. You've got training people up that you have to deal with. Issues on bringing people on quickly, in terms of scaling, or let's say sales and products, whatnot. Like you need to have those systems in place in order to do that. And I think Rocketdyne was really good at doing that. I don't need to develop systems to that extent for what I do or the companies I'm involved with, but certainly I need to have some layer or some degree of those type of systems in order to leverage the scale that you're looking for in smaller organizations. So that was probably the biggest thing I got out of that, um, from an entrepreneurial standpoint. And then from like a technical standpoint, I mean, I really did get to work with, some of the brightest minds in the US. And that was really inspiring. Like you mentioned, I'm a lifelong learner, 3 master's degrees. Boeing paid for 2 of them, which was great. So, sometimes when you have a W-2 and you get some of those, some of those benefits can really set you up right in the future. And so I'm really grateful for that. They were a great company. And those were probably the 2 or 3 biggest things I got out of being a cubicle jockey, as I like to say, for 7 years.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I know you mentioned 3 master's degrees. I mean, what is it that motivated you to pursue, that level of formal education? Like, what was it that you were thinking, hey, this is how is this going to help me in the future? Because there's a lot of conversation right now where people are kind of dismissing the value of formal college education in a lot of entrepreneurial spaces, and you being, and I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. I want to, just speak to the guy who's more educated than most people in every room, right? The guy with 3 master's degrees. Like what drove you to invest the time, effort, energy, money to doing that?
So I'll share a quick little story. My dad's an ophthalmologist, still is today. My grandpa was a general physician. So, I came from a bloodline of doctors. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and none of us became MDs, although my sister is a PhD. So technically she's a doctor, but not an MD.
Yeah.
And so education was always really big in our family. And when I was graduating high school, and I went to a college prep high school, but like I wanted to go to a junior college, for 2 years and kind of figure it out. And my dad was like really against it. And now that I'm kind of thinking about it, I actually wanted to go to the junior college that he went to for a while, right? Pierce College here in LA, right? It's a 2-year junior college. And my dad was like totally against it. It was a big, big issue in the family and argument and so on and so forth. And finally, he's like, look, Chad, he's like, you want to go to Pierce College? That's fine. You're going to pay your own way and you go figure it out yourself. He's like, if you want help with a 4-year degree, I'll help you. And I'm like, man, and so finally I decided, okay, I'll go to a 4-year degree. I went to the Loyola Marymount University. And, but I've always, that's just maybe what kind of started me on that kick. But what I've kind of learned is I'm a lifelong learner. For sure. And Aaron, kind of like what you mentioned, the other person you'd been talking to is 65 years old and learns every day. Like that's how I feel I am. And Aaron, I mean, Caleb, to tell you the truth, I'm on the fence about higher education. I think higher education has changed a lot. And so I was a lot more for it prior than before I am, rather than I am now. But if you're doing a technical degree or something along those lines, like you got to do formal education, right? And so for me, I was civil engineering undergrad, and then I got my master's in structural engineering from USC, and then my MBA from UCLA, and then entrepreneurship from MIT. So I've been like the formal education is just what I've done. But I think the on the job training and somebody who always wants to learn can be just as important, right? And they can do just as well, if not better. I mean, sometimes people can actually be constrained by higher education because they're kind of limiting what they can do. And if you look at some of the most successful people, right? I mean, they've been college dropouts or they didn't even go to college. But one thing that all these people have in mind or have in common is grit, I would say. They're high achievers, a thirst for learning. They're super perseverant, right? They don't give up and they're hungry. So what I like to tell people is higher education will guarantee you a minimum, but nothing guarantees the maximum. The maximum's up to the person, and it doesn't matter what your formal education is like. And this is coming from a
Hmm.
guy who's done quite a bit of formal education. So yeah, those are my thoughts on it. Sorry if it's a little long winded, but
No, that's super good.
you can do it
Just
either
you've
way.
shared. No, that's really good. Just sharing like Caleb said, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are like, "Oh, I'm just going to go." But I think there's a real value in the formal education as a foundation, you know. And I was talking with someone they run a private equity firm, and they have their, you know, masters, you know, MBA, and they're like, you know, a lot of things that opened up was just it opened up their mind, and that
Mhm.
discipline and that networking, you know, that was created from being in from 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 that time period where, you know, those relationships now, you know, 5 years, 10 years, and you just look at it, it's just a small amount of time, you know, like not when you get three masters, it probably takes a little bit longer, but just
Mhm.
for the average person, getting that foundation, I think can be really good. So, but it sounds like you've thought it through on, you know, all the pros and cons of that. So, but yeah, I think there's such a balance of real world experience, you know, even in business, you know, like having a business degree and then being out in the world, you know, there's nothing like starting a business, you
Mhm.
know, and having sleepless nights and having to work through cash flow issues or hiring people or navigating, you know, all the ups and downs of entrepreneurship in the real world. But I do feel like that formal education, I mean, has that helped you? Do you feel like, you know, as a foundation? Because then you got to, you know, you're out in the real world starting businesses and now, you know, be involved in real estate. I would imagine that that has really helped you, though, in some ways, just with having that foundation.
Yeah, for sure. It really has. I mean, even like being an engineer, like we all know engineers and they think a certain way, right? And it's not necessarily that they're born that way. Some were, but a lot of it is training, right? Training
Mm,
on how to analytically look at things, how to do some creative problem solving. So like that is a great background for I think just
yeah.
about anything you do. But then if you want to look at like let's say like an MBA, okay, you can learn, how to read financial statements. You can learn about taxes. You can learn about legal issues and HR issues and like all those sort of things that are pretty important for running a business. You don't have to get an MBA, obviously, but it does help give you a really good foundation that you could kind of
Hmm.
lean on the entrepreneurial side. I will share, like for the entrepreneurs that are listening out there, one of the things that's really helped me out is I joined a group called the Entrepreneurs Organization, and that's I've been a member for over 10 years. I was actually president of my chapter 2 years ago. It's been really helpful for me on networking and working with other business owners because the saying is it's really lonely at the top, and anyone who's doing a successful business, like they kind of learn that sometimes the hard way. And so anyways, the Entrepreneurs Organization has been a really supportive group for me and actually 18,000 other members worldwide.
So that's a worldwide organization.
Yeah.
It's all
Yeah.
over
So
the
there's
place.
like 200 chapters around the world.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah. So they're all over
Yeah.
18,000 members. It's all business owners, founders, majority shareholders.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it's a really good group.
That's a helpful value tip for our listeners. So look up and see if you're listening right now. Entrepreneur, what's it called?
En-
Entrepreneurship.
Entrepreneurs Organization is eonetwork.org.
EOnetwork.org. Check that out. Maybe add some value. So for
Yeah,
sure,
that's cool.
man, I want to shift because as an entrepreneur, there's kind of a core set of values, right? That we all sort of share, and those are anchored around this word freedom, right? And we've talked about that. It's financial freedom, it's time freedom. But as you've sort of, you know, walked through your entrepreneurial journey and built successful businesses and done all that, you've kind of refined it down to not just time freedom or financial freedom, but focusing on freedom holistically, thinking of it in that way. And I'd love for you to speak into that. Like, what do you mean when you say, I don't focus on financial freedom, I focus on freedom? What does
Yeah.
that mean? And kind of unpack that for us.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a subtle but very important distinction. So for me, I look at general freedom as a whole, and
Mhm.
one of the stories I think of is Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba. And, he's a multi-billionaire, and he started saying the wrong things in China, and he disappeared for like 6 months, right? No one knew where he was. And this was a very public, in the eye kind of guy. And he disappeared. And when he came back, he's never never been the same since. So no one really knows what actually happened to him. A lot of people have a lot of ideas. I'll keep my conspiracy hat off for now, and just say that he lost some freedom. He learned what it was like to have all the money in the world and not have some freedoms. To bring it back home a little closer, we've certainly experienced in the recent years, especially with COVID, even very wealthy people, let's say landlords, that have had their property rights eroded over time, right? And I'm in California. I'm kind of at the tip of the spear in that regard, and so there's a continual erosion of property rights. The First Amendment issues, right? There's a lot of rights, I think, that they're under constant attack. It's maybe nothing new, but I think there's a bit of momentum on eroding the freedom that to me is eye opening. And so that's why I like to focus a lot more on the freedom because of the Jack Ma story. So yes, I'd like to be wealthy, but I don't want to be wealthy and lose my rights. That would be more important to me, is to have ultimate freedom rather than wealth. And because you lose everything else. So that's why I focus on general freedom, or freedom as a whole, rather than
Well,
time freedom.
That's really awesome. That's really good. It's an important distinction for the time I think that we live in and this nation. I wonder, because you mentioned before, maybe your views on higher education have changed because of that. I wonder if those two realities are connected. Are they connected?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I mean, I think there's a general, shift that we've, seen in America probably in the last 20 years or so.
Mhm.
Things are changing, right? And I don't know. I don't think I'm that old of a guy to resist change like that, but there's some change that I'm not comfortable with. And
Yeah.
and I think it's best if we stay true to what the original founding fathers, envisioned for the country. I'm a Constitution guy, and individual freedom. That, to me, that's critical.
Yeah.
And so when I start to see that getting eroded in different areas, to me that's pretty alarming. And I like to talk about it and raise awareness so people can recognize when it's happening, because it doesn't happen overnight, right? It's something that happens very slowly over time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the if you throw the frog into the pot
Yeah,
of water that's already boiling, then it will jump right back out and save
yeah,
itself. But if you put it in the lukewarm water and slowly heat it up, then it'll stay in there and die.
yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, it's the same kind of picture.
Our
Yeah, that
water's
idea of
getting warm.
yeah. That idea of the financial freedom, I think so many times, like when you're a new entrepreneur or you're trying to create wealth, it's all about money, right? Like, hey, I want this certain amount of money because then it will do this for me. But then
Mhm,
it's like you realize, like, if, like, for example, if you don't have like personal freedoms, like it's, or even like, I was talking with somebody about this a couple weeks ago. Emotional freedom, or mental health, or the freedom to, or like travel, or you don't have your physical health.
mhm,
Like, you could have, cash flow coming in, but we were interviewing a guy on the podcast who actually had achieved financial freedom. He's down in Florida, and his lifelong dream is to become like, go like scuba diving, and he's so he's physically not fit, and he said it
Yeah.
himself. And he's like, man, I'm like here in Florida, and I've got cash flow coming in, and I've got my businesses, and I've got everything set up, and I'm not physically fit. I don't have like the physical freedom to actually
Mhm.
do what I want to do, even though I have the money coming in. So I
sure.
think so much of it is like that holistic, view of like, of having freedom in all areas, right?
Yeah.
And the financial, it's so easy to just like dwell on money and stuff like that, but then just realizing like that's just one piece
Mhm.
of the pie, right? For happiness and quality of life, and freedom, and living the life that you want to live. So
Yeah. I
Yeah.
learned a
Anything.
lot of it during COVID, being in California during COVID,
Uh-huh.
I got to see a crazy amount of freedom lost. And,
Yeah. Wow.
we're working on getting it back. But, under the, emergency declarations, like the government can do just about anything. And in California, it was brutal. And you've heard stories about small businesses being hammered in California. And,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm partial to that because being, a small business owner and entrepreneur, like I saw that. I knew a lot of people that were struggling, and that was a really tough time. And to me, that really cemented the idea of, wow, we got to keep an eye on this freedom thing because it can go a little bit quicker than I'm comfortable with.
Yeah. Yeah. I I just kind of see vote for Chad in the future, right?
Oh man.
Yeah.
Vote for
It
Chad
really,
keychain.
I did initially have aspirations to get into politics, but it's gotten way too nasty. And
Uh-huh.
there needs to be more workers that become politicians, right? Like the way it used to be is like you had a civilian job, and then you went into politics, and then you went back into the world, right? So those people
Mm.
understood people, right? They understood what it was
Mhm.
like to live like a normal person. But now you get lifelong politicians that have like never signed a paycheck in their life. Like they're out of touch with what I think normal people are going through. But for me,
Mhm.
it's gotten way too nasty, and I kind of hung up that
Yeah.
hat.
Yeah.
Chad 2028.
Yeah, that's it. Come on, let's go. Well, man, another interesting fact I think that our listeners would just appreciate knowing is you've also hosted a couple TV shows, right? On like Smithsonian Channel, National Geographic, that kind of stuff. Just kind of what led to that?
Yeah, so that's kind of a unique tangent I've been on for a while. And it just by happenstance. I mean, I'm in LA, but I was never in the entertainment industry. I was a DJ for 20 years, but that was as close as I got to being in entertainment. But anyways, I applied for a show because I needed an engineering expert. I just found out about it through some engineering buddies. So I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll apply and check it out. And so I applied or auditioned rather, got the gig, and they wound up keeping me on for the whole series as like the engineering expert on the show. And then it was called Human Wrecking Balls, about these brothers, these that hold a bunch of world records for breaking things. So I was like the engineer guy trying to help people relate to how strong these guys really were. And then we did a second season of that show, and I became more like a co-host. And then that production company did another show that they had me host, and then I got an agent somewhere in there, and then she started finding work for me. So yeah, I've done several different shows now. The last one is Smithsonian Channel and Nat Geo for international rights, but it's called Inside Mighty Machines, and diving in with construction crews on breaking things apart to figure out how they worked, and interviewing the people that designed it from way back in the day. So it had a historical element to it. And yeah, it was a really cool show. I got to film all over the world, and do a lot of fun stuff. It's amazing. Like you show up with like three
Wow.
cameras and a 20-person crew, and it opens up a lot of doors. So we'll share
Yeah.
those stories for another time. But yeah, it's
Uh-huh.
it's been pretty cool. You can just search for my name, Chad Zdenek, and find a bunch of clips of different things.
Super cool.
You've done a lot of cool stuff, man.
For real.
In a variety of different industries and
I'm like, I feel like we're talking to like 3 or 4 different people right now. It's like, how do you?
it's so funny the rocket scientist thing, like where you're like, yeah, I was just doing like some
I
rocket.
was just like doing rocket science.
scientist.
Then I was like a TV star. Then I was like a CEO of like a big company.
Just
number
grew
one
the company
in
like
LA.
2000%. No big deal.
No, I'm gonna run
A
for president.
DJ for 20
A
years.
DJ for 20
Yeah.
years. Somehow I fit in DJing.
Make some time to
Yeah.
raise some kids. I got a couple kids.
Yeah. You have 5 kids?
Yeah, 5 kids.
5
Wow.
kids.
So what do you find is kind of the balance with how does that work? Do you just I have 5 kids too.
Oh,
So
cool.
my kids are 10 and under, from 10 all the way down to a 8-month-old baby. So
Wow,
it's just
nice.
kind of that. I find it hard personally, just on the balancing, having a business and having the family, and always trying to, there's that flexibility when you're an entrepreneur, right? Like you can take a day off anytime, but then
Mhm.
it's like it's personal discipline
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
like of having those time, not letting it go into the family time and things like that. And so how do you manage that?
Yeah, and that's definitely a work in progress. I actually speak quite a bit about it in terms of like raising kids in affluent households. That's a really important topic for me. Actually, I on a side note, I put together a resource page if anyone's interested in the parenting thing.
Mhm.
If either I can share with you guys or they can email me, but I put together a resource page that's been helpful for me of all these different videos and books and whatnot. But it's a work in progress. I mean, it's tough, and I don't have the answer there. Every day the answer would change anyways, right? Because the needs of
Yeah.
the family changes and business changes. it's
Right.
it's really it's really hard to figure out. What I would say is pretty helpful is maybe to find a support group of people, because like, as difficult as it is for you or anybody else, like we're all going through those sort of challenges. And I haven't met anyone that's really figured it all out, but it's trying to find a balance that adjusts daily or weekly. Like it's always adjusting, which
Mm.
makes it really tough. And like, and it, like your 8-year-old yesterday is different than the 8-year-old tomorrow. Like I've got 4 girls and a boy, so let me tell you about things changing. And my oldest, I have 18. My oldest is 18, and my youngest is 2. So I've got some range in there. And yeah, you want to talk about like teenage girls and things changing on a daily basis. Like I might have the perfect answer yesterday, but that's not the it's not the right answer today. And
Oh man,
and so
yeah.
it's something I
Wow.
always try to work on. It's not
Hmm.
easy.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. I'd love to get that resource too at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead and let our listeners know what that resource page is, and then we'll share it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, sure. So I would say just email info@csqproperties.com. And
Okay.
also for anyone that's interested in more the business side of things, I actually wrote a book as well, or a chapter in a book called The
Oh,
Transformational
nice.
Journey. So if anyone wants a free copy of a book, email me info@csqproperties.com, and I'll send you
Mm.
out a copy of the book. It shares more about my story and kind of these 3 sections that I've been talking about and what I've
Mhm.
learned about it and how each one kind of helped build on the other.
Mhm.
That's super cool. Yeah. So info@csqproperties.com. You can get the family resource guide page, and as well as a free copy of Chad's book. That's awesome. Well, Chad, man, I feel like we could just continue the conversation. You're really enjoyable to talk to. You've got a lot of insight, a lot of wisdom, a lot of experience. But now it's kind of the time in the show we're going to shift into the exit round. Okay. So we
Cool.
ask every guest on the show the same 5 questions, and I'm excited to hear
No,
how
yeah,
you answer these
absolutely.
questions. So I'm going to jump into question 1 on the exit round. What is your all time favorite business book?
I would say Simon Sinek's Start with Why. And it's
Okay.
something when I transitioned from being a business owner to real estate, I spent a lot of time with that book and trying to figure out my why to figure out my next chapter. So
Mm-hmm.
that would be it.
No,
Okay,
that's so
great.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We asked this for everybody on the show, and I think you are kind of alluded to this already, but what percentage of your income would you say is fully passive? Doesn't require your active involvement?
Let's see. I'm probably maybe 40%.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great number. That's a great number.
It's a work in progress. Like I said, I'm not there
Absolutely.
yet,
Yeah.
but I can
It's a
see
kind
the
of a
path.
tricky question too, right? Because it's like
Yeah,
you're always kind of overseeing and working. And like you
Yeah.
said, I enjoy working too, and like you said, you do too,
yeah.
on the things
And I
you
see the
want to work
path.
on.
I think
So
that's the most important thing is I see the
the
path
path,
forward. I'm not
yeah.
there. I'm still working on it, but there's
Hmm.
definitely a path.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, what is one thing that you wish you could do more of, but your business commitments hold you back from it?
Man, this changes over time, but right now, probably for the last almost a year, has been working out. I've
Yeah.
I'm a 5-time Ironman triathlete. I've been an athlete my whole life, but the last year has been really, really tough. In
Yeah.
part because I started a new business 8 months ago, and I haven't been able to work out nearly as much as I like to, and that's not not good for my mental health. That's my outlet,
Yeah.
so that's something I really
Yeah.
miss right now.
Hmm.
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Hey, if you could go back, this is question number 4. if you could go back in time to, younger Chad, right? Like 18 years old or something like that, what advice would you give to your younger self about building a business?
So I've got two answers here, and it took me a long time to learn this. I was, and it might be obvious because I'm a formal education guy. I was always like in the books, learning what I can do, trying to educate myself. Like I was very gung ho on that. And there's two things that I missed that I didn't learn until like my 40s. And anyone who's younger and listening, or maybe you haven't figured it out yet either. Two things. One is don't be afraid to join mastermind groups and networking. Like to me, that's key. Caleb and I are in a mastermind group together, and it's really, really helpful. I wish I would have started doing that a lot sooner. And the second thing would be finding a mentor sooner. Again, I didn't do that till I was in my 40s. And I hear about a lot of people being able to compress timeframes when they do those things, and I've experienced it myself. Later in life. But man, if I would have started that in my 20s, that would be a game changer. It takes money
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
do that. So really
Yeah.
don't think of it as an expense. Think of it as an investment in yourself, because you are going to have to spend money. But again, think of it as investment. Invest in yourself. Start earlier, and don't be, I guess, like hard headed like I was, thinking, oh, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to do everything myself. Like that held me back.
Yeah, I think like everyone when they're first starting out, like I started my first business when I was 11, right? And so but everyone when they're starting out, they like you are your only income producing asset, right? And you have to invest in that income producing asset, and then the goal is then acquire more income producing assets as you
Yep.
go. But you have to start by investing in the one that you have, which is you. And so
Yeah.
I love that. So
Yeah.
last thing, what's your strategy? And you can give one or two strategic tips or tactical tips, but what's your strategy for creating that time freedom and financial freedom for yourself, for your family?
I think you just nailed it right there. Cash producing assets, right?
Come on.
I think that's the baseline for a lot of types of freedom. Money doesn't guarantee everything, but it certainly can open up some doors for you and can make life easier in a lot of ways. And if you're able to invest in cash producing assets, I think that's a great start to getting you on your way. So I'd leave it at that. I mean, to me, that's a big one.
Come on. Well,
So
man, Chad, it's
can
go
can
ahead,
I just expand one more thing on that I think might help
please.
people, especially if younger people listening to this? Like, okay, yeah, Chad, that sounds great, but I don't have $100,000 to invest in a cash producing asset. Like, like take away if you don't have the money, that's okay. You don't have to have the money, right? I like to say that people have one or all of three things: time, talent, and treasure. Right. So you might be, let's say, young and poor, so you don't have you don't have treasure. Right. You might not have the talent because you're not too experienced yet, but you're gonna have time. Right. You should have some time, and maybe that's something that you can bring to a team that will help you get into a deal. That type of thing. Or if you've got talent, you got some experience, but not the money to invest. Right. What can you contribute to that team to help in terms of an aspect of the team, and contribute and get some compensation that way. So you don't have to have money to invest in a
Hmm.
cash producing asset.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
The three
That's so
T's.
good. The three
I
T's.
hope you haven't trademarked that because I might steal that on
Yeah.
some next
You
next
could you could
podcast.
steal it.
But no, that's good, man. Yeah, the time, treasure, and the talent, and the
No,
talent. Yeah.
that's
Yep.
so good, and that's so helpful for people who, because there are a lot of people that they don't know how to get
Hmm.
started either in real estate investing or just in business in general, because they're like, well, it takes money to do that. But it's like maybe if you tether to yourself,
Yeah.
find where you can add value to another guy who does have the money, but
Hmm.
you have the time, and you can alleviate all these things from him, and get a little piece of the pie for doing that. So that's it's great wisdom, great advice.
Yeah.
Well,
Cool.
man, Chad, this conversation's been super enjoyable for me personally, and I'm certain that our listeners have enjoyed this conversation as well. Where can our listeners find you? Where's what's the one big way they can connect with Chad? Is it emailing you that info at CSQ Properties, or is there other ways they can connect with you?
Yeah, I think the best bet is on social media is just at CSQ Properties.
Okay.
Website csqproperties.com, or if you want any of those resources, you can email me at info@csqproperties.com.
That's great.
That's
All
awesome.
right. So it's all CSQ properties. So if you want to get in touch with Chad, learn more from Chad, get to know a little bit about him, and continue to track with him, follow him on social at CSQ properties, or go to csqproperties.com. So
100%. Yeah, no, super great having you on. And just really appreciate your time and the wisdom and value that you brought to this episode.
come
So
on.
thanks.
Awesome. Hope it helps. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for another episode of Own the Exit. Hey, if this episode meant something to you, would you share it with a friend? Maybe leave us a review, subscribe if you haven't already done that. And until next time, go own the exit.
Thanks, guys.